remember my father correcting me on multiple occasions, and I remember referencing my father's behavior to understand how I was supposed to behave at each stage in my life. If I had not had that as a guidepost, if I had not had that as a blueprint, I probably would have looked to maybe somebody on TV and said, "Oh, that must be what a man does." And then next thing you know, I'd be doing something completely different, right? So really, I think overall, these things all connect to your economics. These things relate to the decline in black wealth in the black community. If you've got billion-dollar entities like the Bobby Browns or the DMXs literally throwing away billion-dollar opportunities in broad daylight, you should not be surprised when somebody turns around and tells you that black wealth is dropping. Why would it not be dropping? If you literally are if it, I mean, think about just how backward it is to have a culture where you show how much money you have by wasting money. Like I'm going to prove to you that I'm rich by taking a bunch of money and flushing it down the toilet, or by going to the club and buying up 80 bottles of liquor, or whatever it is that I do with my money, or buying a car and just leaving the car and throwing the car away. See, what you got to understand, and this is true in economics and really in life in general, just like they say you are what you eat. You know, they say you are what you eat, like, right? If you're eating, if even if you're healthy, if you're eating really bad food, then you're eventually going to become a sick person. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to choices. You are what you do. You are what you do. What you do every day economically ultimately defines what you ultimately become. It's not about where you are. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're rich or poor. I don't care if you where you come from, all that. I'm not looking at where you are. I'm looking at where you're going. If I'm looking at a car and the car is in Ohio, but the car is driving 100 miles an hour toward California, that's not an Ohio car for very long. I don't look at that as an Ohio car because the car's not stationary. It's moving toward something. It's moving toward California. So I'm going to go ahead and anticipate that this car is going to be in California. This is actually how the stock market works. The stock market does the same thing. A lot of people ask that question. They say, well, how can a company that hasn't made any money have a $10 billion valuation? Well, that's because the market is anticipatory. The market is forward looking, investor thinking, the mathematics and everything, and the psychology behind stock market slash investor thinking is they're not looking at where you're at. They're looking at where you're going. Every asset on the entire stock market is valued with pretty much a variant of the exact same equation. It is called the present value of future cash flows model. And all that means is that we're going to look at everything you're going to do in the future and we're going to discount it back to the present, and we're going to value you based on what you're doing and how well we think it's going to go and how fast we think you're going to grow, right? So I can look at a 20-year-old and who ain't got a nickel in his pocket, and I would look at his behavior and say, "Ooh, this boy's going somewhere," because I watch what he does on a daily basis. What you do determines what you're becoming. All of you, everybody in here, all of us, including me, we are all becoming something. We are all becoming something. So the question I believe we should ask ourselves right now is, say, based on this behavior right here, what am I becoming when I act like this? What am I becoming? I mentioned to you all that we're sponsoring a NASCAR driver, LeVar Scott. I talked about him yesterday. I'm super proud of this kid. He's 20 years old. He's one of the few black NASCAR drivers out there, and I just love him. And I just told him, I said, man, I wanna get behind you because I see what kind of person you are. I see how hard you work. I see how serious you are. I see that you're a warrior. I see that you're a winner. I see you got the right mindset. So I'm not investing in you based on what you are. I know you a broke 20-year-old. I get it. That's cool. I'm looking at what you're going to become. I think you're going to be great. You're going to be a superstar. You're going to get on top of the world one day. So that's literally how you think as an investor. You think about the future. So again, because your number one investment in your life that you'll ever make is pretty much going to be you, and then the other investments you're going to make are going to be people in your family. I want you to really look at everything. Look at culture and habits. Culture, habits, and choices, they're all connected. Culture drives our habits, which drives our choices, right? And based on the culture, habits, and day-to-day choices we have, the question becomes, what are you becoming? Based on what you eat every day, what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what are you becoming? Are you becoming a healthy person? Are you becoming a sick person? Based on how you handle your relationships with other people, what are you becoming? Are you becoming a person who's going to be surrounded by love, or a person who's going to be surrounded by hate and negativity and envy and all kinds of other negative emotions? Based on your finances, Are you investing consistently in your future? That means you're becoming a rich person. If you're not investing, if you don't invest this week and because you just want to get to it later or you think it's going to happen tomorrow, well, unfortunately, you're not becoming a wealthy person when you do that, right? It takes time for sure, but at some point, the habits have to change because the habits shape everything. And what I see with Bobby Brown was I see a guy that was really trapped by culture, habits, and choices. The culture of I'm going to get rich by being loud and flashy and obnoxious and crazy and wild and everything else, and the world will reward me for that. That's the bad culture. And then you've got the habits, right? Drugs are the worst kind of habit to form because that's not a habit anymore. It's actually an addiction. And then you've got choices that come out of that. When I am high on dope, when I am high on money, and when I am high on fame, which Bobby Brown was affected by all three of those drugs, cocaine, money, and fame. All three of those drugs had him in a constant state of this weird euphoria that affected all of his choices. And all those choices, I bet you that if you were to sit down and do a deep therapy session with Bobby Brown and ask him to tell the story of his life, you would probably run across a regret every 10 seconds. I would be willing to bet you that everything that he thought was his wildest dream poured into what became his worst nightmare.